at you from the Exodus headquarters in Ohio. Let's jump right into today's episode.
Well, we are live at the Ramada Inn or Radisson. Okay, we're at the Radisson, and we have our friend Dan Johnson in the hotel room. Chad and Dan just got done recording a podcast about cell cameras, camera market in general. And today we're going to be catching up with Dan. We don't get to see him enough or get to talk to him enough, so it's good to take the time and sit down and catch up. So we know you had a crazy season and some small talk at the ATA in here.
Yep.
Just want to catch up, and I know you had a pretty, roller coaster season, if you will, from beginning to end. So if you don't mind, try to give a quick update on the season.
Yeah, it was a crazy season, man. I tell you what, this is what was crazy about it. It was that, man, I was jacked going into the summer, right? I was collecting all this, collecting all this trail camera data of all these deer, studs, and that's typical of what happens in summer, right? The property that I hunt is a classic summer hangout for all deer, right? Just tons of vegetation, tons of ag. I mean, they hit the beans hard when they're perfect for eating, and I get awesome trail camera pictures of all these deer. So it no matter what, you get excited about the potential of coming into a season because you get to see what's growing there. Now, same as every single year, there's a shift, right?
Yep.
We talk about that all the time, the shift that it's somewhere around that late August, mid-September timeframe where the velvet comes off or the food sources change, right? Maybe they go to acorns or whatever. And that typically hits my farm somewhere around that the velvet coming off time frame. And there's a redistribution of the deer herd. And this year was harder of a redistribution, meaning that after the shift, there was not one mature buck on the property.
Okay.
Right. And I take that back. There was 2 4-year-olds, and they were on a different part of the farm, right? But the place where where I ended up shooting my buck this year dried up. And I mean, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trail cameras covering a span of 6 trail cameras covering a span of like 250 acres, right? And that included an ag field. So that shift happened, and this year all the deer went away. So instantly you start thinking, oh shit, man, did CWD, or not CWD, but did EHD hit hard? Because it was a really dry winter or a really dry summer this summer. Did EHD hit? Is there some additional pressure? What's going on?
Because you go into panic mode.
Yeah, and it wasn't that the shooters, the mature bucks were gone. I'm talking 3 does and maybe 2 yearlings for a month and a half in this area. Now, that wasn't the whole farm, but I'm talking about one specific area. And I got worried. I was like, what the hell's going on here? And that lasted all the way until, I mean, I was getting every once in a while a 3-year-old would show up coming through, but nothing consistent, right? So after I take my trail cameras off of the mineral stations and I, get them ready for the season, pinch points, fence crossings, scrapes, whatever, I changed my trail camera game up. Still, nothing was showing up. And I was like, what the hell is going on, And I was worried because I hardly hunted at all in October this year. I really didn't even go after any does because I was busy with the family and work. And so I was nervous going into, not really nervous, but just like, not nervous because typically a deer will show up at some point throughout the rut. It's just a matter of how long he's staying on this farm.
Right.
No, all my local boys were gone. So I was a little.
Have they shown back up, or are they still gone, or have you checked cameras?
Yeah, so the deer, the big boys, didn't show back up until probably October 28th. It was the first shooter I got on trail camera, 28th, 29th. And he was nocturnal, right? So two or three of them, before that, right, I had 3 trail cameras stolen. So my intel going into that season kind of got chopped in half because that particular part of the farm where the big deer tend to hang out, my trail cameras got stolen. And so I didn't really want to put any more trail cameras out to get stolen at that point because, it's just like, okay, I'm just going to focus on the other part of the farm. And if the conditions are right, or if I, see some scrapes pop up or whatever, then I'll move into this area. And so from a trail cam perspective, man, nothing started showing up until like late October, right before the rut. And for the first week of the rut up until November 3rd, everything was nocturnal still. So the deer, the shooter bucks that I was hoping to run into weren't even on their feet during the daytime on the property that I could hunt. And I didn't have any knowledge of what was going on the second half of the farm because my trail cameras got stolen.
That's frustrating.
Yeah.
I mean, going into 2019 now, do you have any plans or approaches to maybe help alleviate some of those issues?
Man, I don't know. I can't do any habitat work on the farms that I hunt, right? Because I just am knock on door permission. I can't plant any food plots because there's, knock on door permission. I'm sure I could ask her, hey man, do you mind if I plant a food plot in this cattle pasture? Well, that just means I got to keep cattle out of it. I have to build a fence. Yeah. I have to do all this extra stuff. And at the same time, I'm not the only person that hunts that property. So
hunt the heck.
Yeah. So if all of a sudden an awesome food plot pops up on this property, what am I going to do? Tell the other guy on the farm, hey dude, just don't hunt anywhere near this?
Yeah.
That's not how it would work with me.
It's going to end up blowing your spot up.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And at the same time, if they planted a food plot, I'd be flanking it some way, shape, or form if I knew a buck was going in and out of it. So.
Yeah, you're in Iowa, man. If they can plant corner beans, there's corner beans. And if there isn't, then it is maybe a pasture. There's not a lot of real estate to carve out a food plot, especially on a by permission property.
Well, and it's a by permission property, and it's a farmed property. I mean, there's livestock on it. And the livestock have the run of 90% of the property. Or I'd say, 80% of the property, and and then it's ag as well. So it's active. It's not like it's sitting there and that's the deer hotel. We don't go in there. And there's no such thing. I mean, it gets coon hunted, it gets shotgun hunted, there's people on it every week throughout the year.
Is this your primary farm that you hunt year in and year out?
Yeah, for the most part.
How many farms do you hunt? I mean, roughly.
Oh, well, farms. I mean, I got one here closer to where I live. That's probably 120 acres, and that's it. It butts up to some public, and it gets pounded. There's a lot of guys who hunt that. The farm system that I hunt, it's like 4 different farms, but they're kind of all close to each other. They all connect, and that's like 1,100 acres. But 60% of that, if not more, is ag. Mm-hmm. So, it's your classic Iowa fingers going up into the ag and then dropping down into a creek system or a river bottom. And
that's the main farm you hunt, I assume?
Yeah, that's the main farm I hunt.
Gotcha. So we got a little off topic as far as you're up to about October 28th, October 29th. Deer have been gone. They finally show up. Cameras are getting stolen. I guess take us off from there.
Yeah, so the rut hit, right? And now it's rut vacation, right? So I go into my routine when it's the rut, right? So my routine is I show up to deer camp, I guess, and deer camp is at my mom's house and my stepdad's house. So I hunt out of there. And my routine is day one, you get there noon, whatever, you check every trail camera on the farm, right? You flip through. Is there anything on here that I want to go after? Okay. That first night, that first check, nothing. There was 2 nocturnal 4-year-olds that I probably would have shot just because there was nothing else on camera. Mm-hmm. So I'm not the kind of guy who is going to, wait and hold out on something that may not ever show up. I like to go off what's in front of me, and that trail camera data is very important to me. So if there was a deer in a specific area that showed up, I would be chasing that deer, right? I'd be going in after him. And so this year, all the deer that showed up were nocturnal. So I went into a routine of, if I don't get the data that I want, I go to my historically good spots, right? And I'll start cycling through the historically good spots, the travel corridor staging areas, pinch points, your typical rut, like really good places to hunt during the rut. I never hunt field edges. And so the first couple days of this rut vacation, I went into my cycle and, was looking for deer. I mean, just not only checking trail cameras, but looking through or seeing what I could see from movement. First night in, I saw a buck a long ways away, and thought he might be one of the shooters that I had on trail camera that were one of the nocturnal ones. I didn't see. He was following a doe. I couldn't see anything. So that was like 2 days, and then it started raining. And I don't know if you guys were. I'm sure you guys got affected by it out in Ohio, where it rained for like 40 hours straight, 48 hours straight, and it rained and it rained and it rained. And I will hunt that evening after a rainstorm passes every single day for the rest of my life, especially if it's in late October, early November. I've killed 2 deer, the first and only deer I saw the entire night. I think I've done it before too, but it rains. The first thing that they want to do, I feel, is make their scent again. Go out, hit scrapes, make themselves known. It's raining consistently so hard that I don't even know if they get up and go eat throughout the day, right? It's just raining. They probably don't make it to the destination food source, let's say like an egg field or whatnot, but they're eating maybe acorns or some shrubs around where they're bedding.
Right, browse.
Yeah, browse. And then that stops, and now it's time to stretch the legs. And that's when they're getting up and they're taking that, the long way around, trying to hit every scrape. And, they get up an hour or two before, hell. I mean, I texted my buddy Ben Harshine at like 3:12. I said, I got a good feeling about tonight. I text him, I just arrowed my biggest buck at 4:02. Or something like that.
You did have a feeling.
Yeah, that night. And so anyway, I get my lone wolf on. I walk into this. And it was so wet this fall that the farmers didn't get their crops out. So we had a small standing cornfield that was probably about 15 acres. That's all it was. It was across the road from a bigger ag field that was still standing, but this smaller cornfield was a perfect staging area inside the timber, right? So, and it also kind of butt up against this awesome terrain feature. So imagine a square, and the top left corner of this square is the drainage of the field that goes down into a bigger drainage into the timber, and the top left corner of this is all thick, nasty, and that's just kind of where they come in and out. They can scent check the field because it just sucks all the air out of this field and brings it back down into the timber. So I set up right outside of this terrain feature, and I was playing the wind hard that night, right? Like it was blowing. Like I'm a huge fan of ozonics, and no, I don't want to say I got away with it because of ozonics, but I was cutting the wind really, really hard, and I have a feeling that deer came through my scent stream to get to where I eventually shot him at. I was hunting him coming off 2 ridges, and I think what he did, and I don't know this because I had my back turned to him when he showed up, but he hit that terrain feature on the top left corner of that field and worked his way through that and popped up on the back side of the ridge. He was already on his feet probably when I was setting up. And then he just we met at the right time.
So you think he was coming off that ridge, scent check that field,
he was
almost getting sucked down?
He was already up on top, I bet. And, everybody says, okay, these deer bed at the end of these ridges, one third of the way up or whatever, or 1/3 of the way down. I think that the rain stopped, or slowed down, didn't stop, but slowed down. And that's when he stood up, and that's when I was setting up, right? Mm-hmm. So he stood up, and instead of coming up the ridge that I was on or up the secondary ridge that led into this terrain feature that I'm talking about, he was on a different ridge, and he was coming up to the top where all these 3 ridges meet, which is that terrain feature, and going to scent check all 3 of these ridges. And I was closer to the 3rd ridge, right? On top of the 3rd ridge where this terrain feature met. And he was able to walk through that, not only scent check the ridges, but also scent check the field. Right? So where the standing corn is. And dude, the raccoons and the deer mowed down the first 5-6 acres of this corn throughout the summer. So it was, tons of deer damage and coon damage, but I think he came off that first ridge of the 3, and then he came down. Well, what happened was it started to sprinkle again. So I'm like, God, I don't want to get here soaking wet. I still got an hour and a half yet before I get down. So I get one arm in my sleeve. I stand up, turn around, get one arm in my raincoat, and I hear a twig break. And typically, if it was dry or there wasn't any rain, I would have never looked at that because the squirrels, the birds were active, but there wasn't a bird tweeting. There wasn't a squirrel on the ground. It was dead silent. The only thing you could hear in the background was, like a grain bin dryer, you hear, right? And I turn around, and there he is standing at 20 yards, staring right at my tree. Like he's 100.
The base of it, or?
No, he's just like, I didn't look. I couldn't see where he was really looking, but he was, all I saw, I didn't see his hindquarters. He was looking right at me. So he's lined up perfectly with me. And I'm just like, oh shit, what do? I got one arm in my raincoat. My bow's hanging right here, and I'm facing the tree. So I have to do a lot of moving in this tree stand to even just grab my bow, get hooked up, and hopefully, I don't even know what way he's going to go. He's going to go to the left. Is he going to go to the right? I didn't know which way he was going to go because he was walking right at me. So then I can start hearing him walk, right? And I am literally listening for his direction change with my ears, and I'm not even. Okay, so now the sound's coming more to my right side. So I look, and he's not focused on me anymore, and he's coming to my right side, which is good for me because I'm able to swing around, grab my bow, and knock up. And he's at 4 yards broadside.
And you still have one arm in a jacket.
No, well, okay, I take it back. I took that off. The first thing I did was lift my seat up on my lone wolf, take the jacket off, set it down, kind of pull it back and crimp it in between the tree and the seat. Mm-hmm. And he starts coming this way, and that's when I made that move where I grab, hook on, take off the hanger, and then he's at 4 yards broadside, and I couldn't do anything because I was doing this, right? I look over and he's walking. So he finally stops at about 12 yards, and he's hard quartering away. I draw back, and there's branches all in the way. So I have to change levels and squat in my tree stand, and I take he's hard quartering away, and I was aiming right for this. The plan was last rib, get it right up through that last rib into the diaphragm, the liver, the lungs, right? Potentially heart, if whatever. But I was going to hit it right in the boiler room, right? And I drew back, I anchored in, I felt good with a shot. It was a hard quartering away, and I mean real hard quartering away, right? And you let the arrow go, and you hear that mule kick, runs off, and I'm just like, oh, right? I wanted to do the, got him, killed him, because all the signs were there that I drilled him, right? But I didn't. Because I'd lost deer, after I'd done that before. Mm-hmm. So I call my buddy Ryan, who I called before my wife, by the way.
Want to clarify.
Right. I called him before I called my wife, because when I called my wife, she's like, I told her I talked with Ryan. He's like, why didn't you call me first? I thought I was your first call. Like, so the wife was a little pissed that I called my buddy Ryan first, but So I, as we often do, we just relive that moment with him.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I don't know, man. I couldn't see fletchings enter him. I couldn't, and I have white and bright pink fletchings, right? I make it so I can see it, right? I couldn't see it because as soon as I'm squatting down, as soon as I don't practice squatting and shooting.
Not out of a stand.
Yeah, not out of a stand. So my feet are close and I'm leaning forward. I'm squatting down. Yeah. I let go of the arrow. But so as soon as I let go, I don't follow through like I normally follow through. I let go and I stand up, right? So I know I see a mule kick and then he runs off. And that's when, I make the phone calls. I wait about 40 minutes, and I get down on the tree. I told myself, I am going to walk over to impact, and if there's a shit ton of blood, then I'll start tracking. But I get down, I walk over there, and then there's white hair. And I just go, oh, shit, I gut shot him, or something like that. Well, if there's white hair, that means I'm way too low. Or I drilled I just shaved his belly off, belly hair, and I hit way too low, or I hit an angle where it came out his guts, and I was like, this is the worst. Like, obviously you start thinking the worst possible thing. So I said, okay, I'm going to find my tree stand. I look back, I find my tree stand, and I'm going to walk away from where my tree stand was, where I hit my deer, hoping like, okay, so if it is a guts, if I just hit guts, I should find the arrow, right? And so I was like digging through the leaves a little bit, walking, 10 feet, looking through, and no arrow, right? And so I went back home, and like I said, best thing to do is give him time, and I ended up going and sleeping on it.
Mm-hmm. Probably the best move at that point. I mean, in that situation, you can't give him enough time, in a lot of situations.
Right, and there was no blood at impact, just white hair. I went 10 more yards further, and I gridded my way back to the shot. So I was on my hands and knees looking to see if I could even see a speck of blood. And so I went home, slept on it, or laid there basically. And the crazy thing about this is, right, I shoot this deer. It's one I've been watching. I found the shed, a shed to him the previous year, so I have history with this deer. I thought I did a good job and on the shot. Then the doubt sets in. I go home, I give it overnight. I start looking, and I'm calling all these people. Hey man, I just shot a big buck. I need some help. And true of all my friends, right? It's like, this tells you what kind of friends you have when they're like, okay, as soon as I get out of the tree, then I'll come help you, right? And I got a lot of friends who sit all day. So they're like, hey man, let me be there at 11. And at this point I'm just like, man, 11's too late, right? So I was there at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and I started, this is a long, this story, the length of the story comes from after the shot, right? I just happened to run into this deer when I came into the new part, into this part of the farm that I had all my trail cameras stolen, and I didn't have any information. Right. I just was like, okay, I'm going to set up where I historically have run in with good deer, and I did a run and gun up on this one terrain feature, and sure enough, he showed up. So that's the strategy part of it. Now comes the long ass story, the additional day and a half to where I didn't find this deer, right? So I shot him, go back the next morning, pick up at the same spot. I put an arrow in the ground where I had impact, and then I start doing my grid because there's no blood, right? So grid, grid, 30, 40 yards from impact, see a speck of blood, probably the size of my pinky fingernail. And there's another drop. And now I start feeling a little good. At least I got some blood, but who knows what kind of blood it is, right? A little bit more, and then boom, a big ass pile. And I'm just like, I hit liver. It looks like liver, it looks like muscle blood, but it's blood and it's good blood, right?
Was that like a bed where he had bedded down?
No, this is just because I had the wind. Once I shot him, I had wind in my favor, right? And where he ran, I had wind in my favor. So I don't think he bedded down because this was only like 80 yards from my tree stand.
Okay.
So he was on his feet at this point, and more blood. So I'm following blood for another 100 yards. That was like dump water out of a cup type blood. Wherever he would stop, there'd be a big pile of it, right? And then drips all the way in between these big piles. And I followed this blood for 100, 200, went down into the creek system, came back up a ridge. And this is the abbreviated story, right? But so finally I got a buddy show up, right? And I'm starting to follow this blood, and it's slowly starting to slow down. I come up to a bed. I see where he had bedded down, gets up, bedded another 25 yards from that, got up, walked around this ATV trail, bedded again, and, stopped, and blood. After this third bed, though, the blood started to dry up, and it was just drip, drip, drip. And I was able to follow it consistently. It wasn't easy like walking down this hallway at the speed we walk. I was following blood like that for 300 yards. Right. And so I find that third bed, and finally my buddy's like, "Hey man, I can come help you now." So we pick up, and now it's starting to get to the point where you need two people to follow this blood trail, right?
It's like leapfrogging one another.
Yeah, last blood type
Right.
deal. Like, I got last blood. Okay. One guy stays here, or we place the arrow there,
Right.
and you start following this last blood. I got it. One guy walks back,
Yep.
puts the arrow, and it's just this process of finding the next blood, finding the next blood. Well, what this deer did after an additional 3.5 hours is he did a huge loop back and hit the original blood trail again, and followed that original blood trail 45, 50 yards, where he took a big loop and he was back on the same blood trail. So we hit that, and we're like, "Oh shit, he's starting to bleed again." And what we didn't realize was that was the original blood trail that we'd already been on. So then we're just like, okay, so how do we know if what we were following just now with all those beds in it was the right, the
Right.
right
What
way?
part of the loop was
Yeah,
it?
because if an X, there's an easy chance you could be going a different direction
Right.
off of it. Well, so we hit the point to where it started crossing. The blood trail started crossing again. So I put an arrow in right there, and now we're actually closer to the tree stand than what we were with all the other beds. Right? He didn't take this linear passage out of the area. He did this huge circle, hit the blood trail again, and it took us 20 minutes to find another drop of blood on the opposite side of this small creek. Right? So he goes, he follows, or we hop the creek, and then we follow it a little ways, and he goes straight up. And I'm saying this fast. I'm telling this story fast, but this is a process of hours and hours. Like, I got there at 8. By this time, it's 1:30 in the afternoon.
So five and a half.
5.5 hours of the first 30, 40 minutes of it are walking, just there's blood. And then the next 3.5 or 4.5 hours are me literally, my hands on my knees, looking down and walking. I mean, at the end of the day, my back hurt so bad because I had my head down looking at my feet. Right? So he comes back around, we follow him, and he goes straight up. Right? You can't go up straighter than this, right? And that point, I'm just like,
Yeah, he's not.
now he's gut shot, right?
Yeah.
Because a wounded deer in the liver, or like major liver damage or major lung or heart damage, is not going up.
Nope.
Right? I've never seen that.
Right.
So we get up, and now I'm starting to see fat fall out, like this long string of stomach fat is falling out of his body, which tells me, okay, the damage is bad enough to where I didn't know when I was going to find him, but I started thinking, okay, if I'm starting to pull stuff out of him, it obviously he's suffering, and that's absolutely horrible, but it's telling me that he's going to die, right? When? I don't know.
Right.
So
at this point, like you still haven't recovered the arrow that you hit him with.
No arrow.
No arrow.
And I'm actively looking for it too.
Right.
No arrow. So, and that's the only thing is like, okay, where's this arrow? If it's still in him, that means it's still working.
Right.
Right. So we get to the top of this, pick that fat up, and now he starts to open up a little bit more again. So then we pick up blood for, consistent blood, easy to travel blood, follow blood. So he goes all the way up, walks 40 yards up this ridge, and then he goes straight back down again and kind of loops back in towards the other blood trail that we were following again, right? And so then my buddy's like, all right, well, I've helped you out for 3 hours now. I'm going to go sit tonight. I mean, I'd help if there was more blood, if we had more sign. And so this deer took this huge, almost a huge figure 8, right? And I'm just like, it starts to sprinkle. And I'm like, man, if it rains, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
Right? And so it starts to sprinkle. And then I just go into grid mode. And I grid. There's 9 ridges in this valley that I hunt that all come down off the tops, right? So I said, I'm going to grid search as many of these as I can. So, and it's a big deer, so I'm not having to look like I'm looking for sheds, right? So I can cover some decent ground, and I just start gridding up and down every ridge, up and down, going into all these thick spots and looking, if I don't see anything, I'm gone, a fast grid, up and down, up and down, up and down, and it starts to pour, and it's just pouring and pouring, and I'm just like, mentally, I'm wasted, because all I'm thinking about now is, I got a deer, I know I'm going to die, who I know is going to die, but now it's a matter of, I have nothing to track him with. Iowa, you can't have a track dog, right? And so it rains almost the entire night, right? And finally it starts getting dark, and I can't, there's nothing I can do in the dark. And pop back up to the truck, go home, and I said, all right, like if he makes it to this really big pinch point on the farm, I have a feeling he's going to, like, if he goes through that, then I don't have a clue where he's going to be. He'll probably die, but I don't know, like, there's a chance he could live for another 3 days, 4 days. And then, that's the risk we all take during bow hunting, right? So my stepdad gets a text from a guy, because I'm on social media, right? I'm sharing this story on social media. And this guy says, hey, man, if Dan needs any help tracking this deer, I don't work tomorrow, And I'm just like, okay, man.
So there's some random dude that you've never...
No, he's a friend of my stepdad.
Oh,
okay.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So he ends up calling me, and I'm just like, I'll take any help I can get, right? And I'm not gonna tell one of my buddies who's, I don't know, who is hunting out of a tree stand. I'm not gonna ask them to come help, grid search a farm with me when they still have plenty of time to go.
Peak time in November.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So I shoot this deer on the 4th. I look the entire day of the 5th, which is my birthday, right? And then the next morning, this guy shows up. He's got a 4-wheeler, and not like it's going to do anything, because it's one of those, I don't know, it's a timber. It's timber, right?
Yeah.
So we grid searched 2 more ridges, and I said, okay, while we're close over here, let's me and you drop down. I want to show you the lay of this, because it's November, all the trees are off, and so you can get this good idea of the valley. And I said, let's go to where I have last blood, and that's gonna give you a good idea of where you think we can go and where else we can start grid searching. And we walk down this ridge. I pop down, and I look back at him, and I'm just like, okay, well, this is up here's my tree stand, and we start walking down, and I look down, and this is not a joke when I say this. This deer died 6 feet from where I stuck the arrow for last blood. So he didn't die on the 5th. He died after I left the timber, right? And he was coming back through behind me. So my thought process was, or what I think happened was, I shot this deer. I let him sit overnight. He went to bed. He saw me or heard me coming through the timber. He was probably on another ridge watching this. And as
you were moving, he was moving.
As I came through, he looped back around, right, where he could get the wind direction, or he could scent check to know where I was at. He didn't want to cross the road. And then probably when I jumped up on that next ridge and was out of his sight, he looped back. He came down again and looped in front of me where he couldn't see me, or where I couldn't see him, and then went up there and sat. And then until it started raining, and then I left. And then he was going to come back through and make probably his last exit of the area. And when I found him, I had hit him a little far back than I thought. I remember on a hard quartering angle, even if you're off a little bit, you're off a lot, right? So I was probably off 2 to 3 inches from where I wanted to be, but that was still rump. So I hit him in the rump. So after I lost my mind, of course, I'm like, holy cow, thank God that I found this deer. And like, I just, you go into joy mode because it's, number one, it's a 5-year-old that I have history with. Number two, it's the biggest antlered buck I'd ever shot, right? I'm pumped. And I'm just thankful. It wasn't the kind of celebration that you would if you double lunged a deer right out of the stand.
Saw him go down.
And you saw, right. And you see him go down. Like that's an awesome celebration. I was just like, yes, like I finally, like,
it's almost like a relief.
Yeah, because I didn't know this deer was suffering.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't like that shit. It's never good.
Well, Something I respect the heck out of, talking before the podcast, you said, I had a good feeling the deer was dead.
Yeah.
I was either, you weren't hunting it, you were walking until you find that deer dead.
Yeah.
Which I think, common sense, everyone should do that.
Yeah.
But I don't think a lot of people, like you're talking about, like, I'm going to walk every freaking ridge. I'm not done walking until I find this deer. And I respect the heck out of that.
Yeah, man. And that's the thing. Like, I just put an arrow in a deer. It deserves to be found at that point, right? I mean, I knew that I was going to, if I didn't find this deer, there's a good chance I was just blowing the farm up, right? And I was ruining that particular part of the farm for the next 5 days, 6 days, right? And by that point, I only had so much time before I had to go back to work, right? So finally, I'm overwhelmed. I finally found him, and he suffered. That sucks, but I think it's crazy because I thought about shooting a different arrow after my elk hunt, right? Going to like a little lighter of an arrow, but I didn't have the time to switch over to new gear, so I was shooting my elk arrow this year for whitetail, and I think that heavier arrow ended up, it's just what I needed for that to happen. I didn't shoot a mechanical. I don't know. We could sit here and talk about mechanicals versus fixed, but I have a feeling that if I switched to a lighter arrow, I would have never found him. If I was shooting a mechanical, I would have never found him. And the combination of the heavy arrow and the fixed blade is why I got the penetration that I did, right? So I walk up on him. I hit him in the rump. It went through his guts, intestine, stomach, nicked the liver, and came out before the diaphragm on the back side of his shoulder, right? So the broadhead was sticking out of him, and the arrow was in him still the entire time. So that's why there were so many beds, because he couldn't sit down. Like, he would try to bed down, and that arrow was in there just making it really uncomfortable for him. And then he'd stand up and probably bed again. And, I only say 3 beds, but there was multiple beds, right? There was beds all, like, just where he stopped. You could see where he laid down and rolled on his side, then got back up and, did the whole thing again. And then one blade unzipped him, just unzipped his stomach, and his stuff was hanging out all over the place. And
insane.
Yeah, that number one, it's a testament for how tough they are. Everybody says that, but their will to survive, like, no human would ever do that. They would give up. they would give up. These animals are wired to be this ultimate survival mode where their brain doesn't allow them to say, I'm done for, right? They don't give up, right? They just go until they can't anymore.
Yep.
And that's one of the reasons why I respect like Mother Nature, is because, and a lot of people, I've had guys within the hunting industry, not within the hunting industry, the hunting community, reach out to me and is like, dude, you took a bad shot. You should have never done that. You made that deer suffer. Your fault. And I'm just like, I mean,
it is.
What do you do? Like that's part of it. Like
you made it happen. I mean,
well, here's the thing. Like, regardless of that deer standing broadside, like nothing is guaranteed. Ever. Yeah. Regardless, like you could have equipment failure. There could be a twig or a branch you don't see. Like if you bow hunt long enough, it's gonna happen. You're gonna have a bad shot. You're gonna possibly wound an animal. You're gonna miss animals. Like shit happens. It's hunting. That's why it's not killing.
Yep.
Well, I think it's interesting too. If let's say that arrow would have went all the way through, or it was positioned differently, he very well could have died in that first bed. It was almost a curse that he had to constantly be up and moving. I think that probably prolonged the time it took him to expire.
Yeah. I don't know. And that, that adrenaline dump it sucks, but and the thing is, okay, so I walk up to him, he's dead. The story's awesome. The really shitty part about this is that, so I walk up to him and you can instantly smell it's all bad. And I talked to my buddy Ryan a lot about this stuff because he's in the medical profession, and he's like, well, it's a gut shot, so all this bacteria is going through, it's meeting up with an open wound, which means the bacteria is getting into his bloodstream, which at this point you probably don't want to eat your meat. Now, if I was single, I may have done it, right? Well, I mean, I say that because I don't want to feed this to my kids.
You can get sick.
Yeah. So like, if I'm going to get, like, my body can handle food poisoning.
Right.
My 3-year-old son, maybe not.
Right.
Yeah. So I made the decision that I didn't want to, not that I didn't want to, I wanted to, but I made the decision to not take the meat away, which sucks because I love eating venison just as much as the next guy, and especially when it's from an animal that is one of your highlights in your personal hunting career, right? I love eating that. I mean, I can eat that jerky or eat that steak and relive that moment every time, which is awesome. And I didn't get to do that with this deer. And although it was like, I found it, I'm happy. And still to this day, I don't celebrate this. I celebrate this deer different than I did from some of my past deer, where I drilled them, I double lunged them, or, I followed him, I found him that same night or that same morning. It's a different kind of celebration. I'm glad I shot him. I'm glad he's going to go on my wall. I'm going to look at him and have that memory forever. But it's different because it went a different way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's an incredible story, man. It's actually the second time. It's the first time I've heard it, straight from your mouth.
Yeah.
But I think you shared it on your podcast.
Yeah.
And tuned in, and just like you said, the testament to the animals and their will to live is something that I don't think that most people really fathom what they're capable of.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nuts. We every once in a while you'll hear someone say, "Oh, that animal suffered," or like maybe a non-hunter, and they get pissed. But dude, I've seen nature be cruel. I remember I watched this buck. Man, this was a really long time ago. I was in a tree stand, and I in a really thick off of a road, and there's a wounded small buck got hit by a car. I watched a pack of coyotes eat him alive, right? And you want to talk about that animal suffered. Right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's just, nature's crazy, and that shit kind of happens. But would I take that shot again? Probably. I'm a killer too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I think for most people, non-hunters, maybe even some hunters, there's a disconnect about what the world actually is and where we freaking come from.
Yeah.
I mean, at one point in time, like, we were living in freaking caves, scratching on walls, living the same exact way where it was survival mode.
Yeah.
Like, people were soft.
Yeah. Yeah. I talk about that all the time. Like, I always have that. I know this has nothing to do with deer hunting, but I have these conversations with some of my friends at work, and we're like, all right, if the apocalypse happened right now, I know I could survive. But who over here do you think would die? Like, who's the soft ones that, the fight or flight, or the flight, fright, how do you say that? Fight
or flight,
and freeze. Because they added a new one, because some people, when they get scared, they don't do anything. They don't even run. They just stay there, and then the zombies eat them.
That's new. I didn't know that.
Yep. So now you learned something from
Fight, flight, or
freeze.
Yeah.
The triple F.
Yeah. So if a guy breaks into this room right now with a gun, you may try to run. You may try to fight him, or you may just sit there and freeze, and then you get shot.
What are you?
I don't know, man. You're in my way right now, so I might be the guy who fights, but uses you as cover.
Boom.
You take a couple shots, then I tackle the guy, and I'm the hero, right?
Cover and move.
Fair enough. I mean, that's a great story, and once again, I just want to drive home the fact that the process you took to make sure you recover that deer.
Yeah.
People are so lazy, or even especially, I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus, but like gun hunters. They shoot, and they're like, I didn't find any blood. And it's like,
let's move on.
Yeah, and it's like, you know how many deer die?
Right.
That maybe you don't find blood right away, and people don't do the due diligence, and that's so annoying to me.
There's people, I'm kind of ashamed to say this, but in my inner circle, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, they'll hit deer, no blood.
Yeah. That's
they'll look for 5 minutes, and then they're back somewhere else.
I mean, that's part of the reason why I stopped party hunting during shotgun season. I loved it. I love the camaraderie. I love the tradition of it. I did not like the fact that it was dangerous. And the day I ended up, the last time I ever was on a shotgun party hunt, I got shot at. Like, there was a deer in between me and another guy, and he was shooting down off a ridge at me. And I threw my gun down, hit the deck. And the other thing is, these guys they weren't doing their due diligence after one was shot, right? Yeah. And during shed hunting every year, and again, I'm not trying to categorize all gun hunters.
That was an experience you had.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and what happened, and then during shed hunting, I mean, for years, I was finding dead deer all over the place, right? And it looked like they probably got shot during shotgun season, right? Because just from the level of
still a little bit of fur, like a little bit of fat on the back of his nose.
Yeah, I mean, and before, like back then, there wasn't as big of a coyote population as there is now. So not all the deer, you could sit there and go, okay, well, this deer probably died 2 months ago during shotgun hunting. So it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we don't want to eat up too much of your Friday evening.
Dude, this is my Friday evening. I got 3 kids. After this, what am I gonna do? Go home? I'm gonna go home, and my wife's gonna be like, "Okay, your turn," and then I gotta sit and listen to them fight over the iPad.
I know the feeling.
That's tough. Well, I mean,
coming from a 24-year-old, right?
Right.
Well, that's where I don't understand. We were talking about all sorts of stuff on the way out here, and it's like, I don't have a dog. I don't have a plan I take care of. And it's beautiful. I like that. So,
right.
Once again, a lot of respect to all the parents out there.
If you ever get married, right? If you ever say, you know what, I think I want to have a kid. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my son. I'm going to let you have him for a week, and then you'll rethink that. And then if you ever have one kid and you think you want to have 2, then I'm going to give you my son again with your kid, and then you're going to say, dude,
that's it.
That's it. I'm
so
done.
No more babies in the future for you. 3's it.
3 is it.
You said that after 2.
My wife tricked me, dude. New Year's Eve, she got me liquored up, and then she tricked me. And next thing I know, he's cute. He's really cool. He's awesome. I love him. I love all my kids. But 3, it's the only reason humans age. I feel like if I didn't have kids, I feel like I would still look 24. and I would still be doing like 24-year-old shit. But now that I got 3 kids, I'm like this weathered old man. I feel like I
just beaten down.
Yeah.
Life's got you. I don't know.
There's some truth to that.
Yeah.
Cleaning up feces all day.
It's the burden of life.
Like no one ever told me, like, I have 2 boys, right? And no one ever told me to prepare me for like parenting that parenting is nudity and feces. That's all that parenting is. Nudity, feces, and like getting so frustrated that you have to go outside and yell at a plant or like.
I can thankfully say that I work a shit ton, and my wife deals with 99% of that.
Oh, man. Yeah.
I'm kind of lucky.
That's good.
She's a saint.
Yeah, my wife's a saint too.
My wife's pretty good, yeah.
My wife deals with it because she's kind of a stay-at-home mom.
Yep.
And she's a hardcore chick, so she'll tell me. She'll express all of her emotions to me. She doesn't like hold anything in. She's badass. But so when I come home, she's just like, listen what this guy did today, blah, blah, blah. You know, like all this. And my son, he sits there and he's just like.
It is what it is.
Hey, what are you going to do about it, Dad? When put me in timeout? You can't touch this shit.
Yep.
I run the house.
Yep.
That's how my kids act until, as a dad, I have a really long fuse. And I let him get to me, and I try to be okay, guys, let's do this. Let's all do this. Everybody's happy. Okay, brush your teeth. No. Okay, come on, let's brush your teeth. All right, come on, let's brush your teeth. No, Dad, I want candy. I want cartoons. Buddy, come on, let's do this, right? That fuse gets shorter until it's, hey, son of a, you get your ass in there right now. I'm gonna kick it all the way down the stairs.
Dude, my son is the same way. He'll be 3 in April.
Right.
And from 6:30 in the morning to the moment he goes to bed, it's wrestling, hitting, punching, bucking bulls, bucking horses, tractors. My daughter. We had my daughter's 5. She'll be 5 this summer.
Yeah.
The easiest, pleasant. You like raise your voice a little bit, and she's in tears. My son, you beat his ass, and he does not care.
No, dude, my kids are a gang. They fight amongst themselves, but if someone like is hard on them, one of them, the other one's got its back, which is crazy. Yeah, it's good, but like I don't need that. Like
I don't need that.
I don't need my kid, like one kid, like I can just imagine when they're all in high school and my daughter or son gets in trouble for them and a teacher's just like, you need to stop doing that, and then like one of my other kids comes in and is like, lay off, bitch, or lay off him. I think this podcast might go down a rabbit hole.
I was just gonna say we're getting pretty off topic, but
no, we can't thank you enough for linking up with us in this.
Absolutely.
Radisson? Was that what the hotel was?
Yeah, Radisson.
Yeah.
Shout out Radisson.
Very, very great hospitality coming in. But anyways, we're getting off topic once again. Thanks once again. If you want to listen to more Dan Johnson, you probably have heard of his podcast, but it's Nine Finger Chronicles on the Sportsman's Nation network. And anywhere else they can find you?
Just sportsmansnation.com is where all the stuff is, and then social, Instagram and Facebook. I do have a Twitter account, but I use it maybe once every 3 months to like post a meme. That's about it.
Fair enough. Well, we'll link to all that as well. Thanks once again, and we'll be talking to you again soon.
Absolutely.